The first thing that felt wrong wasn't the lights. It was the key. My key. It slid into the lock the way it always did. But when I turned it, the bolt didn't click. The door was already unlocked. For a second, I just stood there on the porch, suitcase at my feet, trying to remember if I'd left it that way. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Sprinklers hissed, a flag fluttered lazily on a nearby porch. And somewhere down the street, a dog barked once, then stopped, as if even it was holding its breath. I pushed the door open. Inside, the air smelled faintly of perfume, Chardonnay, and something else. My house looked perfect, the way it always did, but there was a wine glass on the counter, half full, and a silk robe, my robe, draped neatly over the arm of the sofa. That was when I heard the voice. "Gary, someone's here." I froze. Footsteps, then a woman's voice, sharp, authoritative, completely at home. "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" My house. She said it like she owned the place. Her face appeared from the hallway, confident and furious. The same face that had lectured me months earlier about mailbox regulations. Karen Blake, president of the Silverwood Homeowners Association. She didn't recognize me at first, or maybe she didn't want to. I just stood there, the absurdity of it washing over me. She was living in my home, drinking my wine, wearing my robe, and now she was asking me to leave. For a few seconds, we just stared at each other. Me by the door, her in my robe, clutching her phone like a weapon. "You're trespassing," she snapped. I could have laughed if it hadn't been so surreal. But in that moment, standing in my own living room, suitcase still in hand, everything slowed down. The shock, the noise, the absurdity. And then, like a camera pulling focus, my mind went backward, months earlier, to the day I first moved into Silverwood Estates. Because that's where this really started. Not here, not tonight. It started the day I met her. You know, when I first bought that house, I wasn't looking for luxury. I was looking for quiet. After 15 years in cybersecurity, long nights in front of glowing monitors, chasing invisible threats across the internet, I just wanted somewhere still, somewhere green, somewhere I could hear myself think again. Silverwood Estates looked like that kind of place. It had everything you would expect from a picture-perfect American neighborhood, the arched streetlights, the sound of sprinklers in the morning, and those endless rows of manicured lawns that smelled faintly of fertilizer and pride. Kids rode their bikes in slow circles at sunset, neighbors waved from porches, and behind every smile there was a sense of unspoken competition. Who could have the greener grass, the straighter fence, the cleaner driveway? I thought it was charming. For about a week. That's when she showed up. Karen Blake, the president of the Homeowners Association. I still remember the first time she walked up my driveway, clipboard in hand, pearls around her neck, wearing that fixed suburban smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to Silverwood, Mr. Cross," she said, handing me a printed packet of community guidelines. "We're very proud of our neighborhood's appearance. It's what keeps property values so high." I smiled, thanked her, and tried not to laugh at the idea of a neighborhood manual thicker than most software contracts. She pointed to my mailbox, a minimalist black steel design that matched the house perfectly, and frowned. "That style isn't on the approved list," she said, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "But don't worry, we'll get you a compliant model ordered right away." It was such a small thing. I remember thinking, fine, I'll change the mailbox. Big mistake. Because the moment I agreed, she knew she had leverage. A week later, I got another notice. My trash bins were visible from the street for 45 minutes past collection time. Then one about a tree I'd planted. A Japanese maple, not on the approved flora list. It was petty and constant. Every little rule was a reminder. In Silverwood Estates, the HOA wasn't a board. It was a throne. I tried to shrug it off. I even joked with my next-door neighbor, Harold Miller, a retired engineer with a soft voice and a habit of watering his lawn twice a day. He just smiled and shook his head. "You're getting the Karen treatment," he said. "Happens to every new guy. Don't take it personal. She likes control. And you look like the kind of man who doesn't hand it over easily." At the time, I thought he was exaggerating. Then I started noticing her car, the same white Mercedes, cruising past my house every evening, slow enough to read the license plates on parked cars. Sometimes she'd stop, step out, and take pictures of my driveway, always smiling, always polite, But behind those sunglasses, I could feel it. That simmering resentment some people have for anyone they can't control. I'd worked with government agencies, defense contractors, billion-dollar firms. I knew power when I saw it, but this was something different. This was personal. And yet, part of me pitied her. A woman in her late 50s, running a suburban HOA like it was the Pentagon. Maybe it gave her purpose. Maybe it made her feel important in a world that had stopped paying attention. So I let her have her little victories. The mailbox, the tree, the trash bins. I didn't realize then that every time I gave an inch, she took a mile. Looking back now, that's where it really began. Not with a fight, not with an argument, just a smile, a clipboard, and a rulebook thick enough to bury the truth underneath. By the second month, I started to realize that peace in Silverwood came with fine print. You didn't just live there, you complied. Karen's HOA didn't operate like a community board. It felt more like a minor dictatorship wrapped in pastel colors and polite newsletters. Every week brought a new notice. Grass exceeds height standard by 1.5 inches. Front porch lighting too bright may disturb neighbor aesthetics. Mailbox paint not reflective enough for community safety. Each one arrived in a thick ivory envelope, sealed with the HOA's gold-embossed crest like a royal decree. And every letter ended with the same line, bold, underlined, condescending. Failure to comply may result in daily fines. I used to think only government agencies could threaten you that politely. Turns out, Karen Blake could do it just as well. She'd drop by unannounced to check on progress, strolling up my driveway in her beige heels, tapping her clipboard like a metronome of control. "Mr. Cross," she'd say, "you're such a bright man. I'm sure you understand why we have rules. It's about maintaining harmony." Harmony, that was her favorite word. But in Karen's version of harmony, every blade of grass was the same length, and every homeowner knew exactly who was in charge. My neighbors tried to warn me. Harold, the retired engineer next door, told me over the fence one morning. She fined me once for putting a garden gnome on my porch, said it was a distraction from the architectural flow. I laughed. He didn't. Then there was Susan, 3 houses down. She whispered like a witness in a mob trial. "Don't cross her. Last year she got the board to suspend the community pool privileges of a family who argued about paint colors." It would have been funny if it wasn't so real. You could feel it at every neighborhood gathering, that quiet tension under the smiles, that sense that Karen was always listening. She had a way of turning normal people into anxious citizens. I watched one guy, an accountant, nervously measure the height of his hedges with a tape measure while Karen's car rolled by. It was absurd, and yet, part of me admired the efficiency. She'd built a system of fear that ran smoother than most corporate security networks I'd ever audited. Except hers wasn't digital, it was social. Psychological. That's when I started collecting data. Not because I planned to use it, but because old habits die hard. I logged every violation letter, every visit, every timestamp from her car's plate recognition camera as it passed my house. I even cross-referenced her HOA email timestamps against the community mailing logs. What I found was interesting, almost mathematical. Karen operated on a 7-day control cycle. Monday, drive-bys. Tuesday, reports written. Thursday, fines issued. Saturday, personal check-ins. I could have written a white paper about her routine, but behind all the precision, I could sense something else. Jealousy. Not the petty kind, the corrosive kind that eats through people like acid. Harold was right. She didn't like anyone who seemed independent or successful without her approval. I wasn't flaunting my success. I was barely home, but to her, that made it worse. A house like mine, owned by someone who wasn't there to bow to her authority, was an insult to her entire identity. The more I stayed out of sight, the more she seemed to need control over my space. Sometimes I'd come home late from a business trip and find footprints on the side walkway, or the faint smell of someone's perfume near my front porch, her perfume. One night, I caught her reflection in the glass, peering through my office window before driving off. I didn't confront her. Instead, I just stood there in the dark, watching her taillights fade, and thought, people like her don't just enforce rules, they feed on them. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't about lawns or mailboxes anymore. It was about power. And the next time she came knocking, I made sure to record every word. By early spring, I was working 16-hour days. The firm I'd founded, Cross Secure Systems, had landed a contract in London with a global finance client. It was the kind of project that could make or break a company like mine. So, when the offer came, I didn't hesitate. The plan was simple: 6 weeks overseas, come back richer, more relaxed, and ready to finally enjoy that perfect house I'd worked so hard for. Karen, of course, found out before I even told anyone. "London?" she said, one afternoon when I was checking my mail. "How exciting. You must feel so accomplished." "Ethan," she said, accomplished, the way some people say infected. "Just work," I replied, keeping my tone even. "I'll be gone a few weeks." Her eyes lit up. Just a flicker, but I saw it. "Well, be sure to file your travel notice," she said, "and leave a key with the HOA, of course, in case of emergencies." That was rule number 17, subsection 3 of the Silverwood bylaws. Any homeowner absent longer than 14 days had to provide access for emergency inspection purposes. I'd fought that rule when I moved in, but she'd pushed it through, citing community safety. It always bothered me, not because I had anything to hide, but because I knew how easy it was for a key to become an invitation. Still, this was not a battle worth fighting, not yet. So, I locked every drawer, double-secured every password, and handed her a single spare key. "Thank you," she said, slipping it into a little envelope as if she were sealing a treaty. "We'll keep it safe." I wanted to believe her. Before leaving, I did one last sweep of the house. Every sensor, every camera, every smart lock, all linked to a private server only I could access. My home was, in essence, a digital fortress. I remember standing in the doorway that last night, suitcase by my side, lights dimmed, the faint hum of the server rack in my office like a heartbeat. I looked around and thought, "You're safe now." I was wrong. The flight to London was smooth, almost too smooth. For the first week, I barely thought about home. My days were filled with meetings, my nights with jet lag and black coffee. But, somewhere in the second week, as I sat in a glass conference room overlooking the Thames, an alert popped up on my phone. System notice, thermostat override, master bedroom. That shouldn't have been possible. I'd set the house to away mode. Everything was automated, locked, and encrypted. For a moment, I dismissed it as a software hiccup. Systems occasionally ghost themselves after firmware updates. But 2 days later, there was another alert. Smart fridge inventory update. Someone had added a gallon of milk, a brand I didn't buy. I remember staring at that line of text longer than I should have. My reflection ghosted on the screen. My heartbeat didn't pick up right away. It just slowed. Then came the third alert. TV active. Living room. 2 hours, 42 minutes. That was the moment it hit me. Someone wasn't just in my house, they were living in it. I closed my laptop, sat back in the hotel chair, and let out a slow breath. You spend your life designing systems to protect against the unpredictable, the hackers, the fraudsters, the digital phantoms in the wires, and somehow, it's always the human element that breaks through. Karen wanted control, and I just handed her the key. At first, I wanted to believe it was a glitch. Data anomalies happen all the time. Ghost signals, false triggers, firmware bugs. I'd seen it all before. But when your house starts acting like it has a heartbeat of its own, you learn to listen. So, that night in London, after everyone else had gone home, I opened my laptop and logged into my private home server. Every pixel of my system, every line of code, was mine, built by hand, controlled by no one else. The security dashboard loaded. The timeline scrolled. Movement detected. 3:14 a.m. Kitchen lights on. Manual switch. Television active. Living room. Duration 01:57:36. Smart fridge door open. Item added. The time zone was local. Silverwood Estates. Someone was awake in my house at 3 in the morning. I accessed the nearest camera, the one above the kitchen island. The feed flickered for half a second before stabilizing, and there she was. Karen Blake, wearing a silk robe, my robe, pouring herself a glass of Chardonnay from the wine cooler. She raised the glass towards someone off camera and laughed. A man's voice answered, Gary, her husband. They sat at my dining table, barefoot, relaxed, eating from plates I owned in a house I'd built to be untouchable. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen, too stunned to even react. Then something inside me clicked. The rational part of me, the one that lived on caffeine and logic, took over. I didn't rage. I documented every timestamp, every motion trigger, every kilobyte of evidence. I pulled up data from the thermostat, noting temperature changes in the master bedroom. The system showed consistent adjustments every night, between 70 and 72 degrees. I checked the Sonos speaker logs. They'd been streaming easy-listening soft rock playlists. She even had a soundtrack for her crime. The arrogance was breathtaking. Over the next few days, between client meetings and jet lag, I began treating my own house like a surveillance target. I categorized every log file. I set automated backups to 3 secure servers in different countries. When you work in cybersecurity, you learn the value of redundancy. Then came the breaking point. Wednesday night, I checked the interior camera feed from my office, a room no one had any reason to enter. The footage loaded. Karen was standing in front of my desk. My desk. Her hand slid across the surface, fingers tracing the edge of my monitor. Then she opened the drawer. She picked up a framed photo, me and my late wife, Eleanor, and stared at it for a long moment. I don't know what I expected. Maybe guilt, maybe hesitation, but she just smiled. That same smile she gave every homeowner before finding them. I closed the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled slowly. This wasn't just trespassing, it was invasion. She wasn't checking the property, she was living there, hosting friends, drinking my wine, sleeping in my bed. For her, it wasn't theft, it was entitlement. The HOA bylaws had given her the perfect cover, emergency access, and she'd used it to crown herself Queen of Silverwood. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? My HOA president broke into my house while I was in London? They'd laugh. Or worse, they'd call her first. I knew Karen. She'd twist it, claim she was conducting an inspection, accuse me of paranoia. No, this wasn't a job for the police. This was a job for me. I stared at the dim reflection in my hotel window, my own face ghosted against the city lights, and felt something settle behind my eyes. Not rage, precision. She'd made her move. Now it was my turn. Once I knew the truth, I couldn't unsee it. Every bit of data, every feed, every sound that came from my house became part of a puzzle, one I was now determined to solve. Over the next 3 nights in London, I stopped being a cybersecurity consultant. I became a ghost. I'd finish my meetings, excuse myself politely, then retreat to my hotel room overlooking the Thames. Dark curtains drawn, laptop open, headphones on. My home, 4,000 miles away, became my surveillance lab. I mapped out their routines. Karen woke up around 7 a.m., turned on the lights in the kitchen, and brewed coffee. My imported beans, ground fine. Gary liked to wander through my office after lunch, rummaging in drawers like a bored tourist in someone else's museum. They lived comfortably, too comfortably. On the 4th night, I noticed something new, multiple phones connecting to my Wi-Fi network. Not 2, 5. I cross-checked the data logs, 5 unique devices. They'd had company. The next morning's footage confirmed it. 2 couples, wine glasses in hand, sitting on my patio, toasting under the string lights I'd installed the previous fall. Karen's laugh carried through the audio feed. "Well," she said, "when you're on the HOA board, you get certain perks." My jaw clenched. It wasn't just arrogance anymore. It was expansion. I began digging deeper, not into my home, but into hers. I hacked into the HOA's internal email system. It wasn't difficult. Small-town boards run on weak passwords and even weaker oversight. The deeper I went, the clearer the picture became. Karen and 3 board members had started something called the Silverwood Community Initiative, a project supposedly meant to improve neighborhood efficiency. In reality, it was a full-scale control network. They had installed new security cameras on the main roads. But the feeds were routed through Karen's home router. They'd pushed for digital keypads on mailboxes, giving the HOA emergency access. And, this one hit hardest, they were encouraging long-term residents who traveled often to temporarily transfer maintenance rights of their homes to the HOA. Meaning, if you left for more than 2 weeks, Karen and her inner circle could legally enter, inspect, and occupy for community operations. It was brilliant, in a deeply twisted way. She wasn't just abusing power, she was consolidating it. Harold had once told me she'd been HOA president for almost a decade, always re-elected, always unopposed. Now I understood why. She controlled the ballots, the meetings, the perception. And when you control the narrative, you control everything. I gathered screenshots of every document I found. Every transaction from the HOA account labeled maintenance reimbursements. Tens of thousands of dollars were moving quietly each quarter, most of it ending up in shell accounts linked to Karen's husband. It was a suburban coup, a quiet takeover hidden behind freshly mowed lawns and quarterly newsletters. I felt anger, but it was a cold, surgical kind of anger. The kind that doesn't explode, it plans. I didn't want revenge. I wanted exposure. But to expose someone like Karen, you don't shout. You wait until she thinks she's untouchable. That night, I called Harold through an encrypted app. He answered after 3 rings, his voice low and wary. "Ethan, you all right, son?" "Yeah," I said. "I just need to know something. How many people has Karen fined or harassed this year?" He sighed. "Half the neighborhood at least. But nobody fights her. She's got the board eating out of her hand." "Not for long," I said. Silence on the line. Then, "You're planning something, aren't you?" "Let's just say I'm gathering information." "Careful," he warned. "She's dangerous in her own way. She ruined a man here years ago, said he was violating property codes, nearly bankrupted him." I smiled faintly, unseen. "Then she's going to hate what's coming next." After we hung up, I sat in the dark, fingers steepled, thinking. The data was airtight, but it wasn't enough. I needed her caught in the act. And to do that, I'd have to get closer, much closer. So I set the plan in motion. I booked my return flight 1 week earlier than scheduled. And with that, the game shifted. From then on, every move she made was being recorded, archived, duplicated, and stored in 3 separate encrypted vaults. Karen Blake thought she was running a neighborhood empire. She had no idea that she was already living inside my system. And the moment I stepped back onto Silverwood soil, her kingdom would start to crumble, line by line, bite by bite, until the only thing left of her rule was evidence. I landed back in the States a week earlier than anyone expected. Not even my staff knew. I didn't drive home straight from the airport. Instead, I rented a white utility van, the kind you see parked outside office buildings, and met my friend Nick Hollis in a coffee shop near the interstate. Nick and I went way back. He'd been with me during my agency days, one of the few people I trusted with both a secret and a soldering iron. He slid an envelope across the table. Inside were a company badge, a reflective vest, and a folded uniform shirt with Metro Tech Solutions stitched over the pocket. "You sure about this?" he asked. "You could just hand the footage to the cops." I shook my head. "She's too careful. She'll spin it. I need her caught in the act." Nick exhaled through his nose, then smiled. "Then let's make it convincing." By that afternoon, the van bore a full vinyl decal, Metro Tech Solutions, Community Security Services, Authorized Contractor, the kind of logo no one ever questions. That evening, I called the HOA office from a disposable phone, running my voice through a modulation filter. "This is Kyle from Metro Tech. We'll be on site Friday to recalibrate the security displays, part of your community initiative rollout." Karen's voice came through the line, crisp and approving. "Oh, perfect timing. We're hosting a board meeting at one of our model homes that day. You can start there." "Of course," I said. "I'll bring the tools." Friday arrived bright and painfully normal. Sunlight spilled across Silverwood Estates, that same quiet perfection that always hid the cracks beneath. I pulled into the neighborhood behind a landscaping truck and drove slow, steady, like I belonged there. My heart didn't race. It never does when I'm working. What I felt was focus, pure, cold, familiar. Karen's white Mercedes was in the driveway. So were 3 other cars I didn't recognize. She greeted me at the door with the air of a CEO addressing an intern. "You must be Kyle. We've been expecting you." She didn't recognize me. Maybe it was the beard I'd grown, or the mirrored safety glasses, or the fact that people like Karen never really look at anyone they think is beneath them. "Yes, ma'am," I said, tipping the cap. "Just need to check the system connections." "Splendid," she said. "Make sure the main display in the living room's ready before the meeting starts. We're using it for presentation material." Presentation material. She was going to brag about her little empire, using my house as the stage. Perfect. I carried a small black case inside. To her, it looked like a toolkit. In reality, it was a portable relay, a bridge between her network and mine. Within minutes, every camera and microphone in that house belonged to me again. While she busied herself in the kitchen arranging fruit trays, I moved from room to room, scanning devices, pretending to calibrate sensors. In the hallway, I heard voices from the living room. "We'll propose the next phase to the board next month," Karen was saying. "Once we have control of the bylaws, no one can challenge enforcement." A man answered. "And the funding?" "Already diverted. The maintenance accounts, Gary handled the transfers." I smiled faintly. "Gotcha." Then came a sound behind me, footsteps. One of the younger board members had doubled back to grab a folder. He frowned. "What are you doing back here?" I held up my scanner. "Signal interference. Should only take a second." He grunted and left. Close. Too close. I finished the sweep, rejoined my relay system, and stepped outside under the pretense of calling my supervisor. Nick's voice crackled softly through the earpiece. "Everything set?" "Every word she says is recording now," I murmured. "She's planning something bigger, Nick, a full takeover." "Then you've got her." "Not yet," I said. "I want her to see who really owns this place." As the afternoon stretched toward evening, neighbors began arriving for the HOA's executive meeting. The smell of catered food drifted down the street. Cars lined the curbs, their doors slamming in polite succession. From the van, I watched through a live feed, Karen at my dining table, pouring wine, laughing like she'd earned it. The stage was set. In a few hours, she'd stand before that massive living room screen to address her loyal subjects. And when she did, that screen would play something else entirely. By the time the sun went down, Silverwood Estates looked like a postcard, warm porch lights glowing, the air thick with barbecue smoke and overwatered lawns. Inside my house, it looked like a boardroom. Karen sat at the head of my dining table, her pearls glinting under soft chandelier light. Around her, 5 HOA board members murmured over printed charts and wine glasses. None of them knew that every light fixture, every speaker, and every motion sensor in that house was now part of my network again. I watched it all unfold from the front seat of my van, laptop open, screens flickering in the dark like a miniature command center. My relay device inside had done its job. The house was transmitting live data through an encrypted tunnel straight to me. Audio, video, temperature, movement, every breath they took. I wasn't just watching them, I was inside the house again. Karen was talking about phase 2 of the initiative. Her tone was confident, smooth, the kind of confidence that only comes from believing you're untouchable. "Once the revisions to Section 14 are passed," she said, "the HOA will have final authority over property inspections. That means we can enter any home for any maintenance concern." A balding man in a tan blazer asked, "You mean we could legally inspect houses even when people are home?" Karen smiled. "Exactly. It's about safety, Richard, liability coverage. It's in everyone's best interest." I zoomed in on her face, the confidence, the calm, the quiet hunger for control. I'd seen that look before. In boardrooms, in politics, in tech startups that thought they were gods. Power always looks the same right before it collapses. I pressed a few keys, marking timestamps, labeling data clips. Every incriminating line was getting logged in real time. Then, through the mic feed, I heard something that froze me. "What about the Cross house?" someone asked. Karen chuckled. "Oh, Ethan Cross? Don't worry. He's still overseas. I checked his itinerary myself." "You're sure?" "Absolutely. He's predictable. Schedules every minute like a machine. I'll be out before he's even on the plane." I leaned back in the van seat, staring at the screen. Predictable. She'd made the mistake of underestimating the one thing I control better than anyone. Timing. In the background, I could hear wine pouring, laughter echoing through the hall. She clinked her glass against the others. "To community integrity," she said. I recorded it all. Then I moved to phase 2. Through the system interface, I switched from passive monitoring to active control. The lights dimmed by 10%. The thermostat ticked up exactly 1 degree. A faint hum ran through the wall speakers, a low electrical tone that no one consciously noticed, but that the microphones did. Those fluctuations were my signature, proof that the data was authentic and untouched. In court, they'd stand as digital fingerprints of real-time recording. It wasn't enough to expose her. I needed an airtight case. I activated a hidden subroutine in the security software, Odin Protocol. It began compiling a master archive, 4K video, layered audio, metadata, timecode encryption, all synced perfectly. Every word Karen said that night would exist in triplicate across 3 continents. Around 9:30 p.m., the meeting shifted from planning to gossip. Karen loosened up, bragging to the others. Honestly, this whole neighborhood would fall apart without me. People need rules, structure, discipline. One of the men laughed nervously. You sound like a drill sergeant. Someone has to be. Her phone buzzed. She glanced down and smiled. Gary's checking in. He says the model home looks perfect. You should see it. It's practically his dream place. My stomach turned. She was talking about my bedroom. I pressed another key. Audio clip saved. 9:34 p.m. Subject referencing illegal occupancy. The rest of the night was more of the same. Karen holding court, weaving lies about how grateful the residents were, about how she was protecting the neighborhood. I didn't stop recording until nearly midnight. When the last of them left, she lingered on the porch, waving goodbye to her followers like a queen bidding farewell to her court. Then she stepped back inside, closed the door, and poured herself another glass of wine. Through the mic, I heard her hum softly, an old tune, familiar and haunting. For a strange moment, I felt something almost like pity. People like Karen build cages for others, never realizing they're the ones locked inside. I shut the laptop. The operation was complete. Everything I needed, every sound, every lie, every act of arrogance, was now documented in a way no lawyer could twist. She'd spent months turning my home into her headquarters. Now, it was my evidence vault. Tomorrow, I'd walk right through the front door, not as a victim, but as the man holding the detonator. Saturday evening came like a storm hiding behind sunlight. The invitation had gone out days earlier. Community Leadership Assembly, it said, embossed with the HOA's gold seal. Karen wanted a show of power, and she always chose the biggest stage available, my living room. By 6 p.m., cars lined both sides of Cypress Lane. Lawn chairs appeared on curbs. People who usually avoided HOA meetings showed up just to watch. Everyone knew that something was brewing. From my vantage point down the street, inside the van, I watched them arrive one by one. The petty enforcers, the timid followers, the curious neighbors. Harold, my old friend, caught my eye as he walked past. He didn't say a word, but the faint nod he gave me was enough. He knew. I checked my laptop. The relay inside the house was live. Cameras synced, audio perfect. Everything was ready. 6:17 p.m. Karen entered, dressed like she was attending a press conference. A cream blazer, pearls, heels that clicked like punctuation marks on the hardwood floor. She welcomed her guests with the warmth of a politician and the control of a warden. Tonight, she said, her voice carrying through my own speakers in the van, we take the next step toward protecting our beautiful community. I had to hand it to her. She knew how to perform. The projector screen in the living room displayed the HOA emblem. She gestured toward it, commanding attention. We've all seen how certain residents think the rules don't apply to them, how some people believe their money or their status gives them immunity. That ends tonight. Applause rippled through the room, polite, uneasy. Under the new community initiative, she continued, the board will have direct authority to inspect and manage any property deemed non-compliant. No exceptions. There it was, the coup disguised as civic duty. I could see her glowing on the feed, the reflection of power in her eyes. And just behind her, the HDMI cable from her laptop ran neatly into the projector, my signal path. I waited until she clicked her remote for the next slide. The moment the screen blinked, I executed the command. Switch input, external feed. The HOA logo vanished. In its place, the room filled with 4K video, live footage of Karen herself, captured days earlier. There she was on screen, wearing my robe, sipping my wine, sitting at my dining table, the very table she was standing beside now. The laughter died instantly. The only sound was the faint hum of the projector fan. Karen froze, staring at her own image. What? She stammered. What is this? Another clip began, her voice bragging to her friends. When you're on the HOA board, you get certain perks. Then her husband's voice, faint but clear. What if he comes back early? And finally, her fatal line, the one that would end it all. He won't. I have his itinerary. He's not due back until next week. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the rustle of chairs. Karen's face drained of color. This is fake, she screamed, turning toward the board members. "He's framing me! This is edited!" I stepped out of the van. The walk up the street felt like moving through slow motion, each step deliberate, steady, echoing on the pavement. When I reached the front door, Harold was already there. He'd opened it for me. "Evening," I said quietly. The crowd turned. Karen's eyes widened, disbelief flickering into terror. You're supposed to be in London." "I was," I said, setting my briefcase on the counter. "But I came home early." Gasps rippled again. Cameras from phones began recording. The neighbors had their own footage now. "This is my house," I continued, my tone calm, deliberate. "And everything you just saw was recorded here, by the system I designed, the same system that logs every second you were inside." "You have no proof," she snapped, but her voice cracked mid-sentence. I lifted my phone, tapped once. The television screen flickered again, a split-screen view of her using my home office, opening my desk drawer, touching the framed photo of Eleanor. The audience fell silent. "This isn't about fines or bylaws anymore," I said. "This is about trust, and what happens when someone abuses it." Karen took a step back, shaking her head, muttering denials that no one believed. Then, from the crowd, a voice spoke. Harold's. "We trusted you, Karen, and you used us." That broke whatever was left of her composure. "I built this community," she shouted. "None of you would have order without me." "Maybe," I said softly, "but order built on fear isn't community, it's control." She glared at me, one last venomous look, and stormed toward the door. But before she could leave, 2 uniformed officers stepped in. David Chen, my attorney, followed behind them, calm as ever. "Evening, officers," he said. "We have a warrant based on multiple counts of unlawful entry, property theft, and misuse of HOA authority." Karen's knees buckled. The room went completely still as the cuffs clicked shut. Outside, the crowd began whispering, phones held high. For the first time, Silverwood wasn't afraid of her anymore. I stood in the doorway, the night air cool against my face, and thought, justice doesn't always come from courtrooms. Sometimes it walks through its own front door. The night after the arrest, Silverwood Estates was quiet, too quiet. The same street that used to echo with Karen's constant patrols now sat still under porch light shadows. I didn't sleep. I just sat on the back patio, a glass of scotch in my hand, listening to the faint hum of the security server in my office. The system that once guarded my solitude had become the very thing that saved me. Somewhere across town, Karen Blake was sitting in a county holding cell, probably still trying to convince herself it was all a misunderstanding. But there was no misunderstanding. There were 16 hours of video, 12 audio logs, and 3 encrypted backups that said otherwise. The morning brought news vans. Local HOA president arrested in shocking home invasion scandal. They parked at the entrance to the neighborhood, reporters standing against neat hedges, microphones catching whispers from anyone willing to talk. Most residents said nothing. Some said everything. I kept my curtains drawn. I didn't want the attention. I'd had enough of being the story. But Harold stopped by that afternoon, knocking softly like he used to. "You all right, son?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm fine, just tired." He stepped inside, looking around the house, now empty again, quiet except for the low hum of the fridge. "Never thought I'd see the day," he said. "She ruled this place like a queen. Guess the crown got too heavy." I smiled faintly. "Or too crooked." He chuckled at that, the first real laugh I'd heard in this house since the whole thing began. Over the next week, things unraveled fast. Karen's husband, Gary, confessed to cooperating under pressure. He'd signed a plea deal, turning over HOA financial records that showed years of misused funds. The rest of the board resigned in a single afternoon. At the emergency meeting, Harold was nominated as interim president, unanimously. This time, there were no speeches, no grandstanding, just relief. I didn't attend, but Harold filled me in later. They voted to dissolve the community initiative, revoke emergency key bylaws, and restore homeowner privacy rights. The HOA, once a tool of fear, was becoming what it should have been all along: boring, predictable, harmless. As for Karen, the case moved quickly. The DA's office didn't need to dig far. My evidence package was bulletproof. She pled guilty to unlawful entry, property theft, and abuse of fiduciary authority. 3 years probation, heavy fines, restitution. The news said she cried at sentencing. I didn't watch. Some nights, though, I'd think about her. The way she smiled when she thought she was untouchable. The way she truly believed the rules she wrote were the law. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a kind of delusion. Some people build little empires because they're afraid of how small their world really is. The HOA wasn't her power, it was her shield. And when I took it away, she had nothing left to hide behind. A few days later, I replaced the ugly green mailbox she'd once fined me for. In its place, I installed the same sleek black steel one that matched the house, a small act of reclamation. The metal gleamed under the morning sun, the way it had when I first moved in. For the first time, the neighborhood felt normal. Kids on bikes again, sprinklers hissing, Harold trimming his hedges like he used to. The kind of peace you only notice when it's been gone a long time. I poured one last drink that evening, the good scotch, the one Karen had bragged about serving her friends. The ice cracked softly in the glass. I raised it toward the horizon. To order, I said quietly. The kind that doesn't need a president. The sky was burning orange. The air was still. And for the first time in months, Silverwood Estates was finally free. It's strange, the kind of silence that follows chaos. For weeks, Silverwood buzzed with gossip, headlines, and legal talk. And then, just like that, it stopped. People moved on. They always do. New board, new bylaws, new peace. The lawn still looked perfect. The lights still flickered on at sunset. Kids still raced bikes down Cypress Lane like nothing had ever happened. But for me, the quiet wasn't comfort, it was memory. I'd wake up some nights, half expecting to see the glow of my security feeds on the laptop, to hear the faint echo of Karen's voice, sharp and entitled, drifting through the speakers. Old habits die hard, especially when those habits saved your life. I left most of the surveillance system intact, but I changed the rules. No more constant recording, no more data hoarding. Just quiet oversight. A silent guardian, not a paranoid prison. Harold stopped by now and then. He liked to say the neighborhood finally felt human again. Less fear, more laughter. He asked if I ever planned to sell the house. Maybe someday, I said, but not yet. Because leaving would feel too easy, like running away before the lesson was finished. Karen's story, our story, was never just about one woman or one HOA. It was about control. The kind that hides behind good intentions and polished smiles. The kind that starts with a clipboard and ends with a key to your life. People like her exist everywhere, in offices, in governments, in neighborhoods that look safe. They thrive on the silence of others. But silence is just another form of surrender. I learned that the hard way. I let her find me. I let her dictate the mailbox, the tree, the paint on my door. Each small surrender made her stronger, until she mistook compliance for weakness. And that's the thing about control. Once people believe they have it, they forget it can be taken back. The night she was arrested, as the officers led her to the car, I remember her looking at me like I'd betrayed some sacred bond. But I never owed her obedience. I owed her truth. The truth is, freedom isn't loud. It doesn't come with banners or speeches or flashing headlines. It comes quietly, like air returning after a storm. Sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about balance, about putting things back where they belong. I thought a lot about Eleanor during those weeks. She used to tell me, technology's just a mirror, Ethan. It shows who we really are when no one's looking. She was right. My systems didn't just record a crime. They revealed a person. A woman so desperate to matter that she built an empire out of fear. I like to think she's somewhere quiet now, far away from all this, maybe learning what peace really means. As for me, I still live here, still drink my coffee on the same back patio, still listen to the sprinklers hiss in the mornings. The world moves on, but sometimes I catch glimpses of the past. A white Mercedes in traffic, a pearl necklace in a store window. And I remember, not with anger, but with understanding. Because the truth about order is that it can't be forced. The moment you try to control everything, you lose what makes it worth protecting. So, now when I walk through this house, my house, I let it be imperfect. A mug left on the counter, a leaf blown across the porch, little signs of life, little reminders that freedom, real freedom, is messy. And that's the beauty of it. I take another sip of coffee, the morning sun spilling across the floor, and I smile. The world outside feels steady again. No watchers, no warnings, just the soft, steady rhythm of home. It arrived on a Tuesday, no return address, just my name, printed neatly in blue ink. The envelope was plain, government issue, the kind they hand out in correctional facilities. I knew who it was from before I opened it. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at it on the kitchen counter. The sunlight hit it at an angle, throwing a narrow beam across the table, the same table where she'd once sat, laughing like she owned the place. I picked it up, turned it over, and broke the seal. The paper was thick, folded twice. The handwriting was small but careful, almost formal. "Mr. Cross," it began. "I imagine this will come as a surprise. The courts required me to write a letter of acknowledgement to those affected by my actions. But that's not why I'm writing. I've had a lot of time to think. Too much time, maybe. I want you to know that I understand now. Control isn't leadership. It's fear. And fear, once you let it steer you, doesn't stop until it ruins everything. You were right to stop me, even if I hated you for it then. I still don't know if what I felt was anger or shame, maybe both. Maybe that's what justice is, the point where pride and truth finally meet. I won't ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I do hope you find peace in that house again. Tell Harold I'm sorry for the gnome. K. Blake." I read it twice. The second time, slower. There was no bitterness in her words, no excuses, just exhaustion, the kind that comes after realizing you were never in control to begin with. I folded the letter carefully, slid it back into the envelope, and set it in the drawer beside Eleanor's photo. Not as a trophy, not as a warning, but as a reminder that even tyrants are human once they fall silent. Outside, the neighborhood was quiet again. Harold was walking his dog. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and wet pavement. Somewhere, a sprinkler clicked on. I watched the sunlight crawl across the floor, soft, golden, ordinary. For the first time, I realized how fragile all of this really was. Not just the house, or the rules, or the peace, but the balance between trust and control. It's a thin line, and the moment you stop respecting it, everything starts to slip. I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat on the back steps, and let the day warm my face. I didn't hate her anymore. In a strange way, I was grateful. Because without her, I might have kept believing peace was something you protect. Now I know. It's something you practice. Every day. In the little things. A wave to a neighbor. A mailbox left unmeasured. A rule left unwritten. I leaned back, eyes half closed, listening to the hum of ordinary life. Somewhere, a child laughed. A door closed. A bird landed on the fence. It all sounded like freedom. And maybe that's what Silverwood had needed all along. Not control, not fear, not power, just space to breathe. I took another sip of coffee, smiled to myself, and whispered quietly into the morning air, "Goodbye, Karen." People think technology makes us safer, but the truth is, it only makes us seen. I built systems to watch everything. Networks, data streams, lives measured in numbers and graphs. And somewhere along the way, I started believing that if I could just record enough, I could understand everything. But what I learned in Silverwood is that control doesn't equal understanding. You can map every motion, every word, every pattern, and still miss the one thing that makes people unpredictable, the soul, the part that breaks rules, the part that loves, lies, regrets, and forgives, the part no algorithm will ever pin down. Karen thought power came from control. I used to think the same, just with cleaner code and better encryption. But in the end, we were mirrors of each other, both afraid of chaos, both trying to build a world we could manage. Hers was made of paper bylaws and social fear. Mine was built from firewalls and code. Both failed for the same reason. People aren't systems. They don't run on logic. They run on longing, fear, pride, hope. And that's what makes them dangerous and beautiful. These days, I still work in cybersecurity, but I spend less time hunting threats and more time teaching companies how not to become them. Because control, unchecked, turns everything it touches into a weapon, even good intentions. Harold likes to say Silverwood finally feels alive again. Messy, imperfect, human. Maybe that's the best kind of order, the kind that breathes. I still get letters sometimes. Clients, old friends, people who read about the HOA incident online. They want to know what really happened. I tell them the truth in a sentence that always makes them pause. A security system didn't catch her. Humanity did. The rest, the cameras, the files, the servers, those were just tools. But the real defense was something simpler: patience, empathy, and a refusal to stay silent. That's what keeps neighborhoods and people safe. Not surveillance, not fear, just awareness. Awareness that power, even in small doses, changes the way people see themselves. It can make them kind or cruel. I saw both sides of it, and maybe, in some way, I needed to. Because when you live behind screens long enough, you start to forget that what you're protecting isn't data. It's people, not perfect ones, just people. The ones who wave when they pass your house. The ones who argue about fence lines and flower colors and parking spots. The ones who make the noise of living. I finish my coffee, set the cup down, and walk to the window. The neighborhood outside glows in the late morning sun. Calm, ordinary, alive. No alerts, no sirens, just the sound of life, running without supervision. And for the first time in a long time, I don't feel the need to watch. I just let it be. Because the best systems, the ones that last, aren't built to control people. They're built to trust them. The house stands quiet again. Late afternoon sunlight filters through the glass, spilling gold across the floorboards. The hum of the server in my office fades as the system cycles down for the night. One by one, the status lights blink off, green to amber, amber to black. But the last camera stays on. Its lens glows faintly, capturing the empty living room, the same room where everything began. No Karen, no board, just silence, soft and whole. The screen on my desk flickers. The feed pans slowly. The kitchen, the hallway, the patio. Each place carries its own ghost. Laughter, arguments, justice served. Then the camera pauses at the front window. Outside, children play. The sound of their laughter drifts through the speakers, bright and distant. Harold walks his dog past the hedge, waving at someone unseen. The neighborhood breathes again. I close my laptop, slip the key into my pocket, and take one last look around. Everything's back where it belongs, but I know better than anyone that nothing ever truly resets. The camera lens focuses once more, this time on the open door as I step through it. For a second, the frame holds still. Then the automatic system prompts quietly, "Would you like to shut down?" I smile faintly. "No," I whisper. "Keep watching, just in case." The screen fades to static. Then darkness. The system sleeps, but the story stays. If you've been following this story till the end, thank you. Stories like this remind us that freedom, justice, and truth often live in the smallest moments, the quiet ones no one else sees. So, before you go, take a second. If this story hit you, if you've ever known someone who used power the wrong way, or if you just love seeing justice catch up in the most unexpected places, hit that like, drop a comment, and tell me where you're listening from. Are you in Texas, California, maybe watching from somewhere halfway across the world? Let me know, because stories like this aren't just American, they're human. And the more we share them, the more light we shine on the shadows hiding in our own backyards. This is Ethan Cross, signing off from Silverwood Estates. Until next time, stay aware, stay kind, and never stop watching the Watchers.